Hello, welcome to the live stream. How are folks doing today? I really poorly advertised the live stream this week, so we'll see who's shown up. It does look like we may get a feline guest today because there seems to be some interest from the feline portion of the household right now, so we will find out. How are folks doing? How was your week? Lots of people had exciting things going on last week. The most exciting thing of my week was that I booked a vaccine appointment. So Monday, am getting my vaccine, and I'm getting only one because I'm supposed to get the Johnson & Johnson dose, although they can sub it out once you're there, so no guarantees that that's what's happening. But I am very excited. Eligibility opens Monday, for which I am included in that category. So I got it the first day that it was possible. Oh, my Dora. She just did a nice roll and then looked at me, but she's like chilling out the door. So we'll see. The donut is really yummy looking. It is a mango sticky rice donut. And look at that. It's got like sticky rice on the top, a mango topping, little sesames on it. I'm almost losing it. So I'm very excited about that. The one that I think I'm going to try, even though it's chocolate, is there is a one called CBD couch potato, and it has CBD chocolate on the top, potato chips, and a pretzel truffle on it. So essentially there is a lot of stuff going on with that donut, and I feel like it's worth trying out. There is also a mac and cheese with coconut bacon one. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. Don't do it. I really like potato chips and pretzels, and I will say the base is not chocolate. Like, the base is a regular donut of some sort, like a, I don't know, non-chocolate, vanilla, whatever the basic flavor of donut is, donut flavored. So I feel like just the chocolate frosting, maybe it'll be okay. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about it. I really like it when you get like crunchy, salty things with sweet things. So I don't know. I'm kind of eager to try that out. So yeah, we'll see. It sounds interesting. That's for sure. I don't know if it sounds amazing. I was going to talk today about whether or not remote work is going to stick around as an option for white collar workers. And there aren't a lot of stats on this yet, because obviously corporations with predominantly white collar workers are genuinely just still figuring out when their employees are supposed to come back to the office, if they're allowed to require vaccination, are they going to require masks in the office? Like we're still navigating this like initial phase of reentry more than we are navigating permanent remote work. That being said, there's some interesting studies that have been done on the worker side. And I thought it would be fascinating to talk about it as a benefit, because I think remote work used to be this, like, even 15 years ago, the idea that you worked from home was like a very, even 10 years ago, it was a very like, oh, you're one of those people that's found the particular work from home position. And obviously, since the 80s, there's been work from home positions, 80s and 70s, there has been work from home jobs. But being a remote worker in a white collar industry was still extremely rare until a couple of years ago. And now most white collar workers in the world have had a taste of what it is like to be able to do their jobs remotely, or they have learned how much their employer has been skeptical about the idea of them doing remote work, sometimes to the point of disobeying guidelines and laws that are coming down. So I definitely am kind of interested to talk a little bit more about that. And and people's experiences if you are in a white collar position about remote work. And obviously, there are a lot of people who have not been able to work from home during this pandemic because they are in positions that require being physically in a place. Essential workers, which we have all now learned is the term for people that keep us functioning and need to be physically at their jobs. So there are a lot of people for which this does not apply, but the choices to remote work affect even essential workers. So even if white collar workers are more and more going remote optional, they're not commuting in, weekdays, 9 to 5, that affects service industry, that affects public transportation workers, that affects, scheduling of healthcare workers. Are doctors and dentists going to need to have extended hours for office workers now? Like there are a lot of things that are different about how the economy functions if we're looking at this being a huge trend. And obviously, this is like everybody has said many, many times that really what COVID did, and the COVID recession in particular, is it accelerated trends that were already true. So while it was a shock to our system, there were a lot of things that it just made happen faster. One of which was telework has been talked about as this, we're going to switch from commuting. Like, I work in the transportation world as my day job. And in the alternative transportation world, telework was always like, this is the big thing that you need to look at in transportation futures. You can't design all of your transportation systems around journey to work because journey to work is going to start declining and disappearing. And what happened was it got rapidly accelerated, just like, income inequality did, and healthcare inequalities, and lots of things that got rapidly accelerated in this pandemic, one of which was kind of the move to remote work. So Emily says it was a selling point for Trello when I joined, and that was in 2015. Was it a selling point and it felt like that was a unique sort of thing, or was it a selling point and you kind of felt like, okay, but yeah, that's normal in my industry? Because I definitely do feel that like tech had moved to remote work a lot earlier, or like remote optional. But, in 2018, I was doing like a 4-month temp job working for a company that hires like a huge volume of creative and project managers every year. A lot of people come back season after season. And so they already were kind of experimental in like the way they functioned as a company, but they were in the tech sector. And they were like, it was still like notable where we would say, oh yeah, we have a location in Portland, we have a location in San Francisco, and we have one guy who works from his house in Colorado or something. And that was like very much a joke. It was true that he did, but it was like he worked in the office and then he moved and they decided to retain him and let him work from home. And it was viewed as still even in 2018, as sort of like a unusual thing within the tech industry, at least in Portland. So, and I think like working from home on a rare day because you're sick, office or something, was a lot more accepted a lot earlier in like the nonprofit and the tech industries. But I think the idea that you would be permanent remote worker, I think, was less. Emily says it was much more unusual to have a half remote office at that time, or at least it felt that way to me. Yeah, the Aaron's company is like almost 100% remote. They have a physical office, but like there are employees that work all over, and it's very normalized where you're not in any way expected to be located in the same city as the company. I think for almost all roles. I think now very much all roles, and it is. I felt like when he got that job in, what was that, like 2018, that was still like, people are like, oh, wow, that's such a large company to be, almost totally remote. Emily says the company that bought them was incredibly not on board with remote work in a real way. senior guy moved and we let him hang around. And that's 100% how it started. Yeah, I think that's the other thing too, is that like when corporate cultures are so specific to whether or not they view remote work as normal or not. And you really can see that in acquisitions and mergers, as far as like the contrast in corporate culture, where, I think we saw it very early in the pandemic with a lot of corporations that were like, oh, we want to put spy software on your computer, and you need to make sure, oh, if you're taking equipment home, then we need to be able to you always have to have your camera on during meetings. And the pandemic has really made, I think, a lot of corporate culture that was maybe more traditional, more in office, more business, formal or business casual kind of office wear, accelerate away from that. So yeah, I think it's fascinating to see if it's going to go back. Joe says, I was working from home a day of the week in 2015, I think, certainly not full time, and it was slow enough. It was so slow to access my work from home computer. We shifted from desktops to laptops around 2017. Yeah, that is also a really good point. I actually didn't have a computer of my own at my first office job. So if I was either using the office desktop or I just didn't have access to a computer, and I didn't have a smartphone back then. So it was like that. And then we had like a really crappy PC that we had gotten from Free Geek, which is the like nonprofit that recycles computers and like puts Ubuntu on them to try to make like old Windows desktops actually functional. We had one of those like in the collective house that I worked in, and you couldn't like watch videos on it, but you could, open a spreadsheet on it in Google Sheets. That was like the most you could do, but it was definitely not functional for working from home. Aaron says, well, we're 100% remote now, but for a while it was just my team that was entirely remote because my team was from mostly an acquisition that had been 100% remote. See, so that's interesting in the mergers and acquisitions of whether or not the acquired firm is like adopts the culture, the working culture of the company, or if it goes the other way around, like who ends up. And I think it largely depends on how much leverage the company that's being acquired has. If they can make the argument that this is really important to their workers, or that their like talent force is specific enough and remote, then, the acquiring company, I think, is more likely to adopt it if they have a very in-office acquisition. SK says, our HQ is in the middle of nowhere, so remote has been normal. We do have offices, but even in the office, I mostly worked with people elsewhere, not people in the same office. Yeah, that's another thing is like if you are engaged in field work, or like the headquarters isn't really relevant to what you do. In economics, we call it the economics of agglomeration, which is that by having a central business district, you get all these like positive externalities, all these great things that come from business people essentially being concentrated in one part of the city, for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week or whatever. And that's part of what spills over to other industries, right? Like we've seen in cities across the country, like here in Portland, we've had like the drugstore that's located in one of the big office towers close after like 30 years because there aren't office workers down there that are, running in and buying a hot dog or, Advil or something like that on their lunch. And that took a big hit after a year. JK says, I pretty much started working from home when Next closed the Cincy office in 1991. When I moved to Portland in 2014, New Relic was the first time I really had to go into an office since then. Yeah, so I think that my perspective on remote work was really shaped by the fact that my dad was doing remote work so much earlier than like anyone I knew. Like when I was a kid, I didn't know anybody else's parents that also worked from home. So I definitely found, I think like my perception of whether or not it was normal was rare. But I will also note that one of the reasons that your like job had been remote was because you had to do a lot of like client visits and you were on the road a lot, and being on the road would have kept you away from, a main office anyway. And so there's always been kind of an expectation that people are in like sales roles or heavily client facing roles with a lot of clients spread out, maybe would be less required to be near the office. Emily says, at least in tech, I've rarely seen the acquired group adapt the norm because you're buying the engineers. Engineers will just quit. They do not care. Yeah, fair enough. As a non-tech engineer, I agree that acquisition equals buying the engineers. I mean, I just want to point out that there are many industries that go through mergers and acquisitions that are not tech. So tech is one of them, but I think it's really easy to think about acquisitions in the context of like Silicon Valley and like tech startups, but mergers and acquisitions have been around as long as corporations have been around. And there are plenty of reasons why companies are merged and acquired that doesn't have to do with paying off investors or venture capital or something like that. And so it's like, I think it's like important to, I guess, understand that. Abel Jack says, right around April 2020, laptops in the government were pretty much like toilet paper in the stores. That makes sense. I think for my limited experience working on the politics side of government, I think the thing that was like most frustrating to me was that the tools that would be approved to do the job tech-wise were not usually the best tools for the job. And so like every congressional staffer I knew had like 2 or 3 phones because they'd have like their BlackBerry for writing email and as their like actual political phone, and then they have an iPhone for doing anything functional. And they'd have like their congressional laptop that they had to use to access the actual like congressional emails, and then they would have other ones. So yeah. Emily says, lol, I only know my dumb trash industry. Like, so think about mergers and acquisitions in the context of like real industry. I hate to say that and put a qualifier on it, but let's say manufacturing industry. Which maybe it's because I'm from the Rust Belt, but I think of that as real industry. But when you think about it in manufacturing industry, so, there's, for example, I found out there's one company that makes the die molds for almost all shaped pasta in the United States. And a normal acquisition or merger might be that a larger company wants to vertically integrate in the pasta industry. And like, let's say Procter and Gamble is producing lots of pasta shapes, and they're like, why are we manufacturing this pasta, but we have to go to like these dudes in upstate New York to get the dyes made in order to launch a new shape of pasta? What if we just acquire this company? They're not going to like move all of those staff out to, Cincinnati, Ohio, to the Procter and Gamble headquarters. They aren't going to move the whole factory most likely because they're buying it in order to have this vertical integration for their excessively large company. So Procter & Gamble, General Mills, let's say General Mills. I'm getting my Cincinnati, top 35 corporations confused. But let's say General Mills has acquired this like pasta dye factory that is what's used to make the molds for all of the pasta shapes. Like, are they going to move the whole factory? And then additionally, all of the staff's knowledge inside of that company is specific to making these pasta dye molds. If you are going to force these staff to move, if you're going to move the factory, like moving equipment for a large corporation like General Mills and setting up a new factory, it's an investment, but it's not a massive investment for what is a relatively small, pasta shape cutter factory. But getting all of these skilled workers that know how to do this one specific thing for which there is no competitor in the United States to up and move to suburban Ohio, probably less likely. So I think it's like, important to think about like the leverage in mergers and acquisitions. And that comes back to the leverage that employees have with their employer when we look into post-pandemic. So there was a Pew Research Center survey that came out in like December, and then they did another one in March of workers that have been able to work from home who, let's say, are mostly white collar workers, and asked them if they would like to continue to work from home. And there's the 90% said they would like to still have the option. So it sounds like a lot of workers are very much in the category where they would like to not be locked into the office. A lot of people in the very beginning of the pandemic were finding they were saving a ton of money by eliminating commutes, eliminating, business wear. If you're someone who works in a highly traditional industry who is femme, pantyhose really do add up if you need them on a regular basis. So there were a lot of workers that were saving a ton of money early on in the pandemic to commuting costs. But study after study that has looked at work from home during the pandemic has found that people are wanting to buy bigger houses. People are, that's the primary one. They might be moving farther out because they don't have a commute so that they can get a bigger house and they can afford it on their salary. And almost all of the research has found that the higher housing costs that people are trying to absorb in order to be able to comfortably work from home is not offset by the other money that they're saving, maybe lunches at work and, business wear and commute costs. So it's, I think it's important to kind of think about what corporations gain and what workers gain. Because one, I think a lot of people who say they don't enjoy working from home after being forced into it this past year are discovering that actually they don't like working from home in a pandemic, especially when they don't have childcare. And both people in the household, if there are two or more adults in the household, are both trying to work from home. And I think for a lot of folks, there is this difficulty to sift through what was the downsides about working from home versus what was the downsides about working from home during a pandemic. Especially, they found that there was a study that came out that showed that women, trans, and ethnic and racial minorities that were workers that were working from home had greater harassment going on in the workplace when they work remotely. And initially you'd think, but they're working remote. Why would that be a problem? The big issue was all of these companies switched to using tools that were meant for the social internet, and there was almost no one spoke that they had confidence that their employer would be able to protect them from harassment. And so, you've got these unfiltered DMs on Slack, you've got people chatting, you've got a more casual atmosphere. You see your coworkers are seeing way more of your personal life than they would otherwise. And so harassment has very much increased for workers who are not the majority in their workplace. And the other flip side of that is that the people that are suffering the most in this recession and under the work from home model are mothers, and particularly Black and Latina mothers. And because of that, it's very hard to tease out what is the effects of lack of childcare, schools not being open, versus what is actually the downsides of working from home. Joe says it's easier to exclude people if you're all remote. That is incredibly true. This was particularly talking about harassment, though. So, all of the bad things about Twitter have now kind of spilled over into workplaces, Slacks, or Microsoft Teams. And it's a lot harder for HR to crack down on stuff like that. Not that anybody has that much confidence in HR anyway. Emily says, a friend who was one of the few remote workers at one of her previous employers was able to do so because she was in a client relations role. Yeah, I think that's I think that's one of the most important things to understand is how much role is going to affect this. So I think in the very beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing a lot of companies be like, oh my God, we are saving so much money by just, especially like the tech companies we were seeing that offered really big in-office perks, like free lunches are like a pretty normal thing in the Bay Area for tech companies, which is hard for me to wrap my head around. You know, all of these perks, as well as not having to operate office space, essentially a lot of those costs had been shifted onto workers, and a lot of tech firms were already pretty well adapted. Like employees had laptops versus desktop computers. They already were like maybe had a more casual work environment where they were able to work from home occasionally. So a lot of those companies are going, why do we even have an office anymore? That being said, most large corporate employers are expecting to continue to require workers to be in office at least in some way. And that might be that there are certain days a week that you need to show up. Some corporations are considering just having workers entirely return. It seems like corporations are not really sold on the idea that this is been uber productive for employees. And I wonder once again, what is the pandemic versus the pandemic / recession versus what is, working from home. But it does really look like workers, depending on whether or not the balance is shifted in their favor, do want the option. So I think now, like Emily was saying that back in 2015, there was kind of this idea that like offering remote work was like a huge perk to be able to have like a remote workforce. Now, I think that it's going to be considered a standard part of the benefits package that workers are going to use to evaluate whether or not they want to work at a company. And in, workers that have more power, more negotiating power, they're in industries where they can get another job more easily. For example, a developer in the Bay Area are going to be more likely to leave if they desire remote work and a company isn't offering it. So I think it has to be considered as part of the standard corporate culture and benefits package in a way where it wasn't really for corporate America before. It was not unusual for companies to just like deny work from home with no justifications. You say, oh, I want to work from home on Fridays. And they would go like, I'm sure I'll be just as productive, blah, blah, blah. And they could just deny you. They didn't really have an incentive to do that. But now they are going to be very hard pressed to be able to justify when their workers have spent over a year working from home. There has long been a discussion, and the pandemic really exacerbated that. This discussion of disabled workers have been asking for accommodations like partial or full work from home for years. Being able to call off if they feel bad and not go into the office. All of these things have been things that disabled workers have been asking for years. And it was often not a thing that they could get accommodated, work from home. So you have American with Disabilities Act in the United States, which says that you have to make reasonable accommodations for workers with disabilities. However, guess what? Work from home, it was very easy for them to show that it put an undue burden on them if they had no remote workers. And now that all workers for white collar workplaces have had to work from home, I do think we are going to see possibly a lot more cases of disabled workers, possibly even pressing it at the legal level against employers who say it is an undue burden when they're able to prove that their able-bodied coworkers have been successfully doing the job remotely for over a year. Emily says, I love work from home normally. Work from home during a pandemic has sucked, and I don't even have kids. The thing that I learned, my office was, my day job was remote, except you would have 4 office hours a week that you chose yourself. So we were already 90% remote. And then you had the 4 hours a week that you would choose, Monday afternoons that you would be in the office just so that other people would know that they could come find you in the office. And I think it's very likely we're not going to go back to requiring those office hours because we found that functionally you can just tell people you have office hours and they can just G-chat you or whatever. And also, I did not find that was a thing that people used, really. But I only worked at this company for 3 months before, like, everything went in. Also, the beginning of March 2020, we signed a new lease on a much bigger office. And I just been like, oh, I'm so sorry. But and I think that, like, the working from home in the pandemic, it was a huge benefit to me that this was, like, mostly remote, and it was very easy. I work billable hours, so it's very easy to quantify what I am doing. So I don't kind of suffer from what I think some salaried work from home workers have been dealing with, which is sort of like they don't know when to stop. Like, the disadvantages are much greater because they have stress and they're bringing it into the home now. I didn't really deal with that because I'm salaried non-exempt, so I couldn't work more than 40 hours a week, and I work on billed hours, so what I need to do is really tangible. But I really have missed being able to just commute into an office. Like, that was the thing. I have a great home office setup and everything because I worked for myself before I had this day job, and it's, like, ergonomic and great, but sometimes you just want to have to dress up and ride your bike into an office. Even if maybe I think I was less productive in the office than I am at home. But sometimes you just need that change of environment, Denise says, we created a new position for 6 new hires in the fall that all work from home. I've had multiple with a few of them about how horrible their onboarding has been compared to the past with jobs. There's been some companies that have been great at doing remote onboarding, and I think almost all of those companies that have been great at it were doing it before the pandemic. Ones that had to figure out how to do it on the fly and, like, figure out a way to do it, I think really struggled. Also, even a lot of the totally remote companies or, like, remote positions, for the onboarding process, they would still have you come in. Like, they would, have you come in for a week or something and get situated, see that, even if you are a mostly remote employee. And I think that's valuable, Alexis Laporte says, yep, very frustrating to see these companies I interviewed with who are so adamant that they wouldn't negotiate work from home do an about face. I mean, that's been, like, I think the, like, most frustrating part of this for people that have been asking for accommodations for years is, like, suddenly events have captioning and are live streamed and you can attend remotely. People are, like, way more comfortable with canceling. Like, there's just so many ways in which people with disabilities have been saying, we have been asking for this bare minimum for years, and then the second that able-bodied people need it, it happens overnight. So Pixie Dust says, doesn't matter since I have no job, but I hate work from home. I mean, I think the real thing is that, like, I would have hated work from home if we both didn't work from home and move into this place 3 years prior to the pandemic, where we moved into a 2-bedroom, even though there's just 2 of us, in order to be able to have a second room that we can close off. Because it used to be that, we had a 1-bedroom that was really just a studio because it didn't have a window in the bedroom. It was a sliding door that had, like, our couch and our kitchen and both of our desks and our TV, like, all in the same room. And I found working from home there to be a lot less fun. And so we were just very privileged that we both already had this position before the pandemic. And I still enjoy work from home, but I do miss the commute. Mornings at home, afternoons in the office is ideal. I like a couple days a week in the office sort of thing because I like to, like, plan my life around that. But this is the big thing, is that workers want the flexibility. They want the option there. They don't want the butts and seats in the office is the only way to prove your loyalty to the company anymore. However, sung to the tune of inadequately enforced class protections. However, that's the tune. A friend used to walk around the block one way in the morning and the other way in the evening to commute. That was like everybody who is a full-time remote worker's advice during the beginning of the pandemic. They're like, insert a fake commute. And I was like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it 100% would have been good for my mental health because my commute was on bike. So I didn't realize how much that like baseline hour of activity per day round trip influenced my mental health. But yeah, I wasn't gonna bike for no reason. As Kay said, I tried to walk to the park and back as a fake commute too, but that quickly lost out to sleeping a bit longer in the morning. That's the thing, is like, how much is your willpower towards that? Any thoughts about things suddenly be passed down to worker, like faster internet, etc.? You've touched on bigger houses, but there are so many knock-ons. Well, I think that's one of those things where we're really seeing such... It was fascinating to see the acceleration of trying very hard to push for like broadband more globally for all classes and access because of all of these kids going to school, proving that once again, the government only cares when kids schooling is involved. I do think the faster internet thing is interesting because once again, guess who's getting subsidies for internet and stuff like that as remote workers? It's higher income workers. It's, tech sectors. It's workers who already are not in the position where $40 a month for internet is going to, like, for faster internet is going to make or break their budget. It is not the, Amazon customer service reps that are sitting in their home answering angry, chat DMs that are getting paid for, their internet or getting an offset. But we were already seeing the switch by, utilizing work from home contractors in a lot of these like lower paid but white collar positions, as far as like moving things to, moving to more contractor positions or something where you're considered someone that doesn't get any of the employee benefits. We'd already been seeing that trend. So yeah. Pixie Dust says, I get too lonely. I mean, that is real. I didn't realize how much I appreciated just people I didn't care that much about being around me. Like, not close friends, but like just people you see on a regular basis. There's like value in the background noise of humans. Emily says, that's been the big issue for me this year. Normally, I'm not lonely because I do other things in the evening. Without, everything is harder. I saw someone online that was saying, I think the real reason that people want to go back to working in office is they have no social life outside the office. And I was like, ooh, I get that. I totally get that. For me, too, it was like, it wasn't even just that my social life was my coworkers, but my social life revolved around my like work day in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, removing everything is not really the best way to test the success of one component, right? That's why you don't design an experiment that's like, we changed everything to test just one thing. And that's essentially what we did, is we changed everything. School, like, whether or not you can see people, whether or not people had jobs, like the economy, like it all changed at once. So yeah, Plague Year would not pass IRB review, correct. My single friend thinks his verbal skills are off. Mine are. Mine 100% are. I am lucky in that because my job was already mostly remote and I do very like technical work versus like a lot of organizey, communicatey work. I have very few meetings a week, and I can go like 10 hours a day where I do not say anything out loud, and I've really realized that. It's actually been the value of starting to do the private Croatian lessons, in addition to being a hard thing that I'm working on and giving me a sense of fulfillment in this time when we have nothing fulfilling going on. It's also that I talk to a human that isn't the same person for 2 hours a week. I have friends who quite literally rely on face-to-face meetings to be able to get things done that are struggling hard with the combo of personal and work people withdrawal. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing for me too was it really revealed to me how there were some people that needed that face-to-face meetings, and then there were some people who dreaded those and found them to not be a barrier to work. And I think we've really shaken out how, I think at the beginning, people really didn't know how to do, they just tried to replace it with constant meetings. But it really tells you a lot about the nature of your work, I think. Just like my friend, but he has no cat to talk to. But I do enjoy talking to the cat. That's nice. Do you have any other questions about, we'll just talk about the cat. A large percentage of the sentences I've spoken out loud over the past year have definitely been about the cat. I would venture to say like 80% of our conversations are about the cat. 10% are about nachos and whether or not we can justify having nachos that night. And then the other 10% is other stuff. So we set a goal that, because we're both taking Croatian lessons, that whenever we talk about the cat, since we don't actually say very complex sentences, usually it's like the cat is tired, that we should be able to say all of the things we say about the cat in Croatian. So it would be like, you know, ona spava, macha spava. That would probably be it. Oh yeah, what is box though? Do you know box? We have developed strong, unique voices for both cats. They talk a lot. That's the downside, is that we only have one cat. So the cat, we mostly just talk to her and say, like, you know, ti spavish. Which just means you sleep. That's most of what she does. What is sparkly ball in Croatian? I know neither of those words. Neither. I will ask my instructor. She has been very keen to teach me random words I would find useful. So the coffee shop substitute a lot of random social interaction I would get in the office in normal times. Yeah, I don't get a coffee shop, so I miss that. But I would also say that, like, as a remote worker prior to the pandemic, I'm like a self-employed person, sometimes I needed a change of scenery and I would just go to the coffee shop and work. And right now that hasn't been an option, to be able to like sit in the coffee shop and work. And like, I always knew I'd be less productive going to the coffee shop simply because like setting up, ordering things, sitting down, finding a non-drafty spot that has an outlet, like all of that just takes up a lot of time that I wouldn't at home. But sometimes you need that change of environment for your brain. My dogs are voicing their displeasure with Dora having screen time. Well, you know, they should start a live stream. Functional vocabulary. Yes. I really don't know. I don't even have a guess of sparkly balls. I'm only like 3 weeks into learning Croatian, so you gotta give me a break here. 4 weeks? I'm like a month into learning Croatian, so I'm baby. Yes, Dieček. No, dijete. Yes, Hrvatski dijete. I also have a feeling that ball is just ball. I felt like I was almost like, I bet I could just kind of pronounce it as though it's Croatian, and it'll probably be very close to how it is. So the thing that's really gotten me about Croatian, not to get too into linguistics again, but has been, there's a lot of words that are the same as English, and then a lot of words that are stolen from German or Russian. And the problem when trying to memorize vocabulary is I can't remember if it's like the Russian, the German, or the English one that it's close to. So I'll just start like, or there'll be words that aren't the same as the German word, but look similar. So like raditi is not to talk in, and it's like very close to the German word. Anyway, we don't need to talk about this anymore. Okay, should we eat this? Yeah, let's eat this. So I would love to know, while I work on this, type in the chat, if you are an office worker, are you going back to an office? Has your company said anything about it yet? Are you going to have remote optional as an option? Did you already before? So this is the mango sticky rice donut. I think it's really important that you see that it's got these sesame seeds on it. Like, it's very pretty. So I'm very excited about this. It's less messy than last week's donut. It doesn't smell strongly of mango. So it's just a regular donut on the inside, made of donut flavor. So should I bite into the rice at the same time as the donut, or should I separate it out is the real question. It does have a hole in the bottom, so I thought it was going to be like deep in there, but Denise says, I do 50% of my work at a computer, and empathetically, I'm not allowed to work from home. Unless I'm quarantined, in which case they'll let me do 100% of my work from home. Cool. Perfect employer logic right there. Brian's going to push for at least part-time work from home. That's the big thing is like I'm very interested to see how this shifts that conversation. Work just straight up got rid of the office lease at some point before I joined, so no office to return to. I really do feel bad for my company because we opened the office like March 2nd, 2020, the new office. So we were in a converted like apartment in like an old office building that we have 18 employees. So every employee could not be in that office at once. So the one all staff meeting we'd have each month, there weren't enough chairs for everyone. And we were like crammed in. Because it was essentially like just a large it was kind of like working out of a coffee shop or your friend's house. So it wasn't like ergonomically set up. We moved in the same building to to us, a massive office where everybody can have their own desk. And we like got, standing, sitting desks for everyone and external monitors. And then had to close the office 2 weeks later, but we signed a 3-year lease. So Pachyderm has not renewed the lease on the San Francisco office and has distributed the rent money among remote employees as a remote working benefit fund. Well, that's very badass. We did have remote as an option the entire time. I'll probably go to the office less than before, but will regularly go as long as I live close. Yeah, that's the other thing is like some people have actually like moved farther away. I'm going to try to eat it. It's just logistically challenging. Okay, the sticky rice is great. It's getting my lipstick all over it. The sesame is getting up like in my mouth. The sticky rice is fantastic. I have to just take a bite and then take a bite of the mango. I'm going to say the mango taste is not that strong. How many bites to the center? I mean, I'm in the center. The center of the sticky ball. This is very logistically challenging to do, I'm going to say. This is one of my favorite donuts from them. Even if it is really hard to eat. I feel like now that I've gotten it in half, it's going to be like easier to eat because I could just do it like this. No, 5 out of 5 donut rating. Oh. Mango sticky rice is falling everywhere. I'm going to make like a little mango donut acquisition. Also, there's a cat hair that fell in there. How? She's all the way over there. Oh, that was the best bite yet. Because it was like surrounded by donut and mango on all the sides, but then it was sticky rice in the middle. That last bite was the way I should have eaten the whole donut. That was excellent. I'm very glad I remembered a napkin. I probably have sesame attached to every part of my face now. But I support that. That was a great donut. Dora does not care. What time are we at? Good. All right. Well, we had a donut. We talked about remote work. People mentioned leases, and I did want to say we're probably not going to really know what the trends on the corporate side are as far as closing offices, because for large corporations, offices are such a big investment, and commercial leases are usually 5 to sometimes up to 20 years long. So that shift that might be happening might not happen as quickly as we might think. If companies are maybe going to shift to fully remote or something like that, I think in the end, it's probably going to end up becoming a benefit that some employers have. And in certain industries, you are going to have to offer that flexibility to at least work from home sometimes in order to be competitive. And I think that's like very, very obvious that that's true in certain sectors. But I think there's some sectors that are gonna be able to get away with just going straight back to the old norms. So I think it's gonna be fascinating to see. They should make a donut truffle version. So they have the pretzel truffle in the CBD donut, like in the middle. I think I should try it even though it has chocolate on it. All right. Everybody tell me what they're looking forward to this week. And I think we'll close out for the evening. I am looking forward to my vaccine, and everything else is not important. In weird work benefits, since it's kind of related, my work said they announced actually after I had managed to get my appointment on Monday, and I had scheduled it like the last slot available because I have to bike like an hour to get to the place. So I'd booked it for the last slot available, which is like 3:20. So I was going to have to leave the office at like 2. So I was like, oh, I'll just work a little earlier in the day and hopefully won't have to take too much PTO. But they announced that when you get a vaccine and or if you get any side effects from the vaccine dose, you do not have to take PTO for that. Because our PTO is our sick days, but they will still pay you for that as time worked because they don't want to be the barrier. They don't want PTO to be the barrier between people feeling like they have to work if they are feeling sick from side effects, or like they don't want to get a vaccine appointment because it's at the wrong time and they'd have to take the whole day off. So I thought that was a nice perk. SK is looking forward to the 4-day Easter weekend. Sometimes feels like a weekend to usually compared to that's good. Oh yeah, you're in Europe, so you get a 4-day Easter weekend. It's very normal in Europe. Like I think almost all countries in Europe have like Easter Monday and some have Good Friday off. We do not have that in America. That's super rare unless you work for like a religious institution, I would say, or maybe in very, very conservative religious areas. But it's very rare to get that Monday off. So Aaron is getting the vaccine on Wednesday. Denise says no temps below freezing this whole week. It was 66 on Friday here. So that's what, 25 Celsius. It was like delightful this week. Denise says, that's awesome, Lily. Mine also gave COVID PTO for side effects days. It makes a difference. Yeah, I think that's like a big thing. Once again, pointing out that when able-bodied people need accommodations for feeling poorly, they get them. But when disabled people have been asking for them and just for the bare minimum, they do not get them. Once again. Denise says this is going to be the easiest 30 days of biking ever. Pixie Dust says, taking the bus. Oh, that's very exciting. Are you now at I saw a Twitter thread about what we are going to call people when they've hit that post-vaccine threshold. So after you've had like your full doses of vaccines and you've waited the 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks for the J&J vaccine. Anyway, what we were going to call it. And my favorite one was street legal. So now that's what I'm going with. You're street legal once you reach that full immunity amount. SK says Denmark even had Thursday off for whatever reason. I love like the least religious country in Europe has the most days off for a religious holiday. Just going with it. Thursday is Holy Thursday. It just seems like it just seems like there's a lot of holidays, but you know, it's fine. Isn't Thursday Little Friday in Denmark, like in the Danish language? I wonder. That's very fascinating. Also, like Sweden celebrates on Christmas Eve instead of Christmas. Anyway. Approaching the Crest says, I became street legal on Wednesday. Congratulations. That's very exciting. Are you doing anything exciting with your street legalness? I know that there's like limits to what you can do and still like be safe. But for me, my things that I had been putting off until I am street legal, I scheduled for the day after I will be street legal. And they are skating, going back to the skating rink, and getting a haircut. So I'm very excited about both of those things, even though they're 3 weeks away. Pixie Dust says 3 weeks after the first dose, which is good enough. Nice. I am getting the 1 doser, so I'm supposed to only wait 3 weeks. So. All right. Well, I'm very excited for everybody's. Joe is like, you don't get the Easter weekend. So here's a thing I would like to remind you. In the United States, we have this thing called separation of church and state. Also, we do not have mandatory holidays for workers in any way, shape, or form. So we have federal holidays, and federal holidays, there is only one religious holiday in the federal holiday, which is Christmas Day. And other than that, they are all secular holidays that are like celebrating veterans or celebrating Martin Luther King. And additionally, so we have separation of church and state. And then additionally, corporations don't have to give you any time off that they want. They could give you 0 off. We have no mandatory time off in the United States. So hello, welcome to the United States. And of course, in many countries, even with mandatory days off, things are still open and service industry workers and essential workers are still working on those days. So, you know, it's not really true in most countries. Emily says, we just don't like people taking vacation. Yes, this is accurate. Which turns out to actually be very bad for productivity. But for some reason, the capitalist appeal to anything that improves life for workers, even when you can argue it makes them more productive, seems to be a challenge for the United States. Look, I'm tying it all back together with work from home. Not approaching the crest is doing nothing special yet. I think I will go swimming next week. Oh yeah, that's pretty exciting. Yeah, so Christmas is the only like religious federal holiday, which is what I was saying. SK says that it's not that reality cares about that being in the constitutions. Germany still has no dancing on or loud music on Good Friday on the books. Yeah, that's fair. SK, so that's in most European constitutions too. You say that, but then there are so many religious holidays and things that were like very hard for me to understand as an American. It's like, I think Americans are louder about religion than a lot of European countries, but there's so much more stuff left over because we were founded like the country of America, not the continent of America and all the people that lived here before, but the country of the United States was founded on religious freedom and separation of church and state. And because of that, like, we don't have any leftover stuff from a feudal system around religion. So I mean, that isn't to say there aren't plenty of conservative areas and obviously lots of places that are like dry counties for religious reasons and stuff like that. And it comes into law, but separation of church and state is like more normal here. Like when I was in India, I was very surprised to find out that you can go to a government school that is run by Catholic nuns, which would not at all be legal here. So that like what we call public in the US, which is the opposite of public in like the UK, but what we call public here, our government schools, would never be able to be run by a religious order. So Abel Jack says, I got my second shot on Good Friday and I am now suffering the passions. All right. I appreciate that we got this nice. We got a lot of things tied up here at the end, so we should probably end, and we should end before Lily starts going off about religious freedom in a way where she ends up pissing people off or getting corrected by more constitutional scholars than her. Anyway, everybody have a fantastic week. I look forward to hearing about all of you that are getting vaccines or are becoming street legal and the slight reintroduction to society that we are all getting. And I hope that you all stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you same time, same place next week. Bye.